That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Women Talking, the fourth film directed by Sarah Polley, which premiered at the Telluride Film Festival, opened in limited theatrical release December 23rd, 2022, courtesy of United Artists Releasing, and will be experiencing a wider release January 20th, 2023.
Do I know Sarah's other work?
No. Well, she started out as an actress using a lot of notable Canadian films like Adam McGowan's The Sweet Hereafter. I think she's quite good in My Life Without Me. She's in the Dawn of the Dead remake. My personal favorite, which you have seen, is Splice, opposite Adrian Brody. But she's since kind of given that up to be a screenwriter, director. Her narrative debut, of course, was Away From Her, starring Julie Christie, which is an excellent film. Then Take This Waltz, which I also like, with Seth Rogen and White Michelle Williams. Her last film as director was 2012's Stories We Tell, which is a very personal, kind of family-oriented documentary. She's also written... she adapted Alias Grace, the Margaret Atwood novel, for, I believe, Mary Herron directed that for television. So she's been busy kind of with... and very multifaceted.
You've seen this movie twice now.
Yes, and notably it's based on a 2018 novel by Miriam Taves, who appeared in the Carlos Regadas film Silent Light, which is about the Mennonite community, that's the 2000 film. That's an excellent film, the Mexican filmmaker. And this is based on her 2018 novel. She adapted her own work.
I think the subject matter and the basic story is supremely interesting.
I agree.
But as a film, this really did not work for me.
It's strange. Like, I want to like it, and there are things I do like about it, but I also, having watched it twice now, I feel very distant from it, and not because I'm a male.
And we watched it with two other people, and we spent the entire time kind of like howling at the screen for various reasons that weren't always great. So... yeah, the basic story is about this Mennonite community, which I'm not super familiar with. To me, I would have assumed they're like Amish.
Yeah, they reject technology, but they're kind of a section of Anabaptist Christians.
They're highly religious. They live with like on the bare minimum, and there are like some very strong gender roles. Mm-hmm. And so we are introduced to this group of women who are like in a barn. And initially, it's not clear. I mean, there is a clue that we're in modern time because we see a horse and buggy, and the buggy has like modern decals on it. But if you miss that, you would think, I mean, this could be like olden times. So all these women are in this barn talking, and we find out that they are trying to figure out what their next steps are because all of the men in the community are with law enforcement because there was an incident, and we find out that these men have systematically been drugging these women and raping them, which has led to unwanted pregnancies, STIs, which of course then leads to like severe mental health issues. So it's all come to a head, and they're trying to decide, should we stay or should we go? Mm-hmm. And the bulk of the film is this sort of debate between these women. Mm-hmm. And they never quite get to... I mean, it would have been a hung jury, except that the men come home unexpectedly. Like, bail's been posted and they're back in this community. So they're like, oh shit, we need to make a decision, and they decide to leave. And then that's when we see sort of the magnitude of how many people are in this community, because we see all of these women early the next morning packing up their buggies and getting ready to leave. The end. Yeah,
and organizing a caravan to, get out of Dodge.
So we sort of see the caravan start to move, but we don't know if they were successful, if these men came out and stopped them. But that's the basic story.
The author actually was inspired by a real-life incident in 2011 Bolivia, where a community of Mennonite women were being drugged and raped by the men.
You described this movie as like The Village meets... You said something when you were trying to explain it to me.
To me, it's like if you took the women from the village and after several generations, they realized that this wasn't any good for them either.
I think that's a good description, except that I had so many... The reason the story is so interesting is because there are a lot of questions that one would have. Unfortunately, the film doesn't answer them, which is fine, except that... I don't know. I was very confused by a lot of what we're presented with. So a key character is the guy. What's his name?
August, played by Ben Whishaw. And I probably have the most problems with him and what he's really representative of.
Ben Whishaw plays this guy who's been tasked with taking the minutes for this meeting these women are having. So I don't know who has him there and why they feel comfortable with him there. I mean, they explain that it's because his mom was a member of the community and she left. But I don't understand why he's taking minutes and how the men of the community feel about him. To me, he read as gay, but he's not. He is in love with one of the women.
Ona, played by Rooney Mara.
And so he had left the community to go to school, came back because he's in love with her, and then he promised to take care of her children, so he stays when the women leave. I found that character so strange because if he really cares for her and these women and he's highly educated, I don't know why he wouldn't help these women understand.
Yeah, it's like if somebody told you to go somewhere and they know the way to get there. They don't give you the directions. Like, these women are going to be wandering, and he gives them this map.
He gives them a map and then he teaches them how to look use the constellations to.
But it's like I need him to give them some clear directions and tell them what to expect when they get to.
Well, then I kept thinking, I don't know where they are, but they can't be that far off the grid because earlier on in the film we see that there's because we get some flashbacks that the 2010 census takers showed up at their community, which means that they have an address and they get mail. So they can't. I kept thinking if these ladies, one of the ladies who has an STD or an STI ends up going to a mobile clinic that is in walking distance. So it was very unclear to me what these women know about what's outside of their community because what they're debating makes it seem like, because I also didn't mention, because you think, why are they staying? They're staying because they're highly religious and they've been told that if they leave the community, they won't have access to the kingdom of heaven.
Not only do they're told they have to apologize to the men.
So the men who brutalized and raped them, they have to apologize. So of course, some of the women ain't with that shit, but some of them actually. So what I think works the best is this film, the story. So I don't know if it's necessarily the filmmakers doing, but the story itself really presents a scenario that is quite alarming sometimes when we think we're with people and we should all be in accord. And then we realize oh, no. You actually think these men deserve to be forgiven and that maybe their actions were reasonable. And I'm over here there's one lady who's talking about, I want to stay so I can kill them.
Claire Foy, yeah.
So that was very interesting. It just feels more like you're watching a kind of not the best debate session.
Yeah, well, it's like seems like some of the women are representative of different stages of grief.
Yes.
As well.
So to me, the story reads as maybe how people process trauma, which again, very interesting. But another thing that confused me is we're told that they're not educated and some of them are illiterate because they're all voting on how to proceed. And so the way they vote is they have this big piece of paper and they have these drawings and one is two people fighting, one is a horse, and then the other one is a man, I guess, staying with the man. And because these women can't, most of them, I don't know, can't read. Instead, they have to put a cross by the picture to determine what they want to do. So if these women are being sheltered and controlled and not allowed to educate themselves, it seems so odd that the way they're talking, they are highly articulate and they have ideas that are very well formed.
Well, and really talking through some existential conundrums.
Right. So you would think that these women are well read, and because even if they can't leave the community, they've read about what life is like outside of it, but they haven't. So I was it was very confusing listening to them. These women seem like they should be able to make well-informed decisions, but they can't, and they seem so confused about how life works.
The other thing that I think it misses out on a level of tension that would have made it a bit more powerful because they're really on a time crunch. They are. With the sun going down, the men returning before they finish speaking, and the level of violence, which we only catch the merest glimpses of, such as the character Greta, who has the dentures that don't fit in her mouth because
her teeth got knocked out.
Her teeth got knocked out, and it's the level of violence that some of these women experienced was significant. Because
there's one woman who it seems like she's just given birth, and she's bloodied and running, smearing it across the room, and it wasn't clear to me if
that's the trans character.
so it wasn't clear to me what's happening with that. Then, okay, so
Nellie Melvin.
then we have a trans man. So one of the women in the community has sort of had the understanding that, her gender is not what she was assigned. And then I don't know, it's a very interesting topic. Like, oh yeah, what would happen in a community like this where one of the women or one of the men, their sexuality, their gender isn't what is standard. And I don't know that this film does anything with it except that her character chooses to be mute. And we find out she's mute because she's not going to speak until people stop addressing her by her dead name, his dead name. So there is a scene where one of the women, trying to get information from this character, calls them by their male name. And then all of a sudden she starts speaking. And I thought that was a powerful moment, but it's just a blip. And it seems like, I don't know, there's so much good stuff in here.
I agree. And some of, Taves, as I said, wrote their own screenplays. There, some really great passages about how hope for the unknown versus hatred for the familiar. Judith Ivey, who is Agata. It's nice to see Judith Ivey.
Which one was she?
She's Agata, the older mother. She's the one that has the speech about how they've never asked men for anything and talks about having 13, 14 kids.
Oh,
and she's stayed her whole life there. But she's a very, renowned stage actor. She won a Tony over Sigourney Weaver. They were both in Hurly Burly in 1984. You might know her as Keanu Reeves' mother in The Devil's Advocate, though. And there's a really interesting movie she was in about truck stop prostitution called What Alice Saw from 20 years ago.
What did Alice see?
Some stuff.
Something nasty in the woodshed?
I forget where I was going with that, but Judith Ivey has a line about maybe the abuse of forgiveness, how forgiving too many times allows people to feel like they have permission over to just keep harming you.
There's some interesting moments of brevity that I think are well done. There's a moment when Jessie Buckley's character, who we need to talk about, because she's very angry, she has sort of like a laughing fit, and then the little girl, the woman who's narrating, because I didn't explain that either, there is narration.
Autje, who's America's child, who is really narrating the story to the unborn child that's in Rooney Mara's belly, a child of rape.
She talks about how sometimes she thinks people like the boisterous laugh they have is meant to hide their crying. But there's that moment. Then there's a moment where one of the women, because the barn is up high, like 3 levels up, like it's on stilts or something. And one of the women yells, "I can't live a second longer." And then she jumps. And so we're like, oh my God, this woman just killed herself. But then she jumps to like a hay bin and then starts laughing. So I thought those are very effective, but like, I agree, there isn't a lot of tension. Even the pivotal moment is when the men return unexpectedly. And even that scene, I think, is hobbled because we find that out when one of the little boys runs into the barn and the women are like, "What are you doing here?" And the mute trans man is pointing at the kid's nose. And we find out that the boy has a cherry seed stuck in his nose. A pit. And then, of course, like, where'd you get that from? Oh, my dad. Oh, my God, the men are back. Even that didn't feel that alarming. We see Jessie Buckley's character get beat up, and that's handled off screen. We just see her bruised and bloody. I don't know, some of the impact of some of the things that are happening were lost on me.
It feels very much like an eloquent stage play, but it doesn't make sense that it's so eloquent sometimes.
There's a line that really hit me hard. One of the women says, "If I get married, I wouldn't be myself, so the person you love would be gone." And that's the woman who...
Rooney Mara.
Who, what's his name?
August. Ben Whishaw.
Ben Wishaw's character's in love with. That was pretty powerful. But again, for a woman, for that character to say that line, I just feel like, why are you here in this community acting like you can't
There's so much out
thrive
there for
outside
you.
of it? Yeah, there's so much. And I'm sure people would argue that there are a lot of very smart, thoughtful people who get stuck and say, yes, I know that, but there's always a reason why. And in this instance, because, it's even like watching that one movie about Waco, Texas, and how, or any of these cults where like people are brainwashed. I didn't get the sense these women were brainwashed. This is just what they're accustomed to.
They're conditioned. They're
conditioned, but then it's like, God, they seem so aware of their feelings and what they want and don't want that I felt a little lost.
Well, and then it feels so contrived that they're like, August has agreed to take care of the boys that will remain behind, but he only came back because he loves this woman, and the tragedy of him, like of her walking away, and he'll never see her again. It's like,
and he's so sensitive and thoughtful. What do the other men think of him?
well,
like,
and
aren't they
also,
abusive towards him?
Also, wouldn't it make more sense for this educated man who has their back to stay with them and help them as their guide?
And the entire time I'm thinking, I bet you like within 2 hours walking distance, there's like a Walmart or a Waffle House. I just got the sense that they were not off the grid.
Again, it's like 2010. He didn't think to assist them in letting them know where there are some potential resources for where they might stay. If
his
they find
character
a
is
city.
the most baffling to me.
Yes, it doesn't gel correctly. But the whole rape thing and women as hosts, it also reminded me of Village of the Damned.
There's a very good scene which relates to Jessie Buckley's character because she is mad. She is mad and she's like, I don't know why y'all are so stupid to think that we shouldn't leave. But there's a moment when another character has like a panic attack thinking about the assault. And Jessie Buckley's character is basically telling this woman like that we were all attacked in the same way. Why is this so much harder for you? And I thought that was a very powerful scene because I think that's what the movie is about too, is like life is hard for all of us. And in this instance, all of these women shared this experience and yet they all react to it so differently. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes the story so infinitely interesting as a conversation piece. And I feel like if this would have been a stage play where we just have 10 women in a round circle talking about the shared experience and how they, I mean, I could listen to that for 4 hours.
But the artifice of the stage and the suspension of disbelief, I think it's easier to achieve.
It would aid that, yeah. But in this, and then the movie is shot, it's so dreary and dark.
It's very desaturated. It's an ugly looking film, really.
So it just, I don't know. I just didn't connect with it.
I did like the score, though, from Hildur Gunnarsdottir, who won the Oscar for doing Joker, and she did Tar this last year now. There are a lot. I think Claire Foy is a standout, I think, in her rage, as is Jessie Buckley. But I think I respond to that kind of behavior automatically because that's how I would see myself feeling in that situation. But
at the point, it's like a little over an hour when the women realize the men have come back early. I wrote down that this felt like one of my work Zoom meetings where it's like 16 of us on screen all talking about the same topic and everyone has their own opinion and we're not getting anywhere, and then time is up and it's like, okay, what are our action items? And then it's like, well, we didn't come to any conclusions, we just have to move forward because we didn't. That's how this movie feels,
right?
Like if a hung jury I guess he's guilty and we're just
and that's what's also I think frustrating is there's so many distractions, which not to say that there wouldn't be, but it's like I think there are 2 times where they break out in a song and it's like,
or there's a time when the one lady, I think it's the older lady, who says like she thinks she's dying and the other character's like, you're not dying, your glasses need cleaning. Mm-hmm. And then she wipes them. Like the tone is fine and I like how it's broken up and it doesn't feel monotonous. It just feels like we're not getting anywhere and I'm so confused by what this environment is like.
I think you're supposed to be frustrated by it.
Yeah, and that's fine. I enjoyed that aspect of it, but there are moments when I just thought like I need a little bit more to fully connect to this story. Lastly, that caravan is, I mean, there's a ton of stuff happening in the early morning hours, and I don't get a sense like how could these men not hear these women leaving and packing up? And
sure,
I mean, they get a huge group together and like it looked like maybe 15, 20 horse and buggies, and there's no way these men would just let them leave. So that was confusing to me too.
Well, because it's doing that thing kind of like, I know there's Ben Whishaw, but like George Cukor's original The Women, where you don't see any men. Like
I'm fine with not seeing the men, and I'm also fine with maybe thinking like, oh, maybe the men are letting them leave because they know they're in trouble and the jig is up. I could get with that, but I just needed I feel like there's not enough to point me in a direction of like how I should be feeling. So left to my own thoughts, I'm just frustrated. And then I could talk for hours about a lot of the themes in the film, but not because the film did a good job presenting them. It's just inherent that.
Yes, I think, the material lends itself inherently to that. And I think that is why maybe the film feels a little overly praised. Because compared to Polley's, I prefer her previous 3 films as director than I do this one. But again, it's not that I don't like it, and I really gravitate very strongly towards some elements of it, and then felt, I don't know, some of it just felt a little too forced and artificial too.
I would recommend it as a conversation piece. What would you give it?
I think 3 is fair.
I would give it 2.5 out of 5. Like, it's okay, but it did leave me wanting. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button.
Although, the Park Chan-wook movie, Decision to Leave, could have been the title for this movie as well.
Listen to our podcast. Bye.